In the class, we have been looking at putting together content and designing the content in a single HTML page using HTML and CSS. But the real superpower of the web is the ability for HTML pages to link to other HTML pages and to link to other content throughout the web. The way that this manifests itself within your own website is to have several HTML pages, all of which have a navigation structure with links that link from one page to the next. So your home page will link to an about page will link to a contact page, etc. And all of those will link to each other. So what we're going to do in this video and in preparation for the final project is look at how to put that structure together. But before we do that, we're going to venture into another new area, and we're going to look at using Visual Studio Code for putting together your website. Up until now, we've been putting designs together in CodePen, which is great. It's a great place to show off your work. It's a great place to experiment with new things to see if they work. But it's not a great place to build a website that you might eventually ship out to production and have be representative of your work. Or it's not a great place to do work for a client. So right now I have a blank document open in Visual Studio Code, and it's pretty bare bones. We don't see a lot going on here. We just see some menu options on the left-hand side. Some of these are generated by some extensions that I have installed. There's my user profile, there's settings, etc. And then there's some extra stuff up here that kind of determines how the window looks. And then we've got tabs, one tab in this case, of document that we have open, ready to go. So before we get into starting our website, let's look at the settings in Visual Studio Code just to kind of get a feel for things that we can do to kind of make the editor feel more at home. So I'm going to open up my settings menu, and there's all kinds of stuff in here. You can do just so many different things based on how you want your editor to behave. But a couple things that I'm going to call to your attention. First and foremost, there is a font family option, and the font family works just like the font family does in CSS. So you can specify a comma-separated list of different fonts, and then they will apply to the code that you write. Out of the box, VS Code ships with Menlo, Monaco, Courier New, and Monospace as the fonts. I have a couple Monospace fonts that I really like that I have installed, primarily because I look at my editor all day long. I want it to feel good. You can change the font size here with font size. That is really great for readability. You can change, whether or not when you hit a tab, whether that's 2 spaces or 4 spaces or whatever. That kind of thing is totally up to you. But the main things that you're going to want to do is you're going to want to set your monospace font, or leave it as it is if you like. And then we're going to enable 2 specific settings that will make your life a whole lot easier. First of all, we're going to do white space. I'm sorry, word wrap is what it is. So we're going to look up word wrap in the search menu here. By default, this is not on. That makes it so your line lengths will go off the screen. You'll have to scroll horizontally to find it. So I would recommend turning that on so you can see all of your content within the same window. And then we're going to look up format on save, and then we're going to make sure that that's checked to yes. The only reason that I don't have this checked to yes is because my day-to-day job uses a formatter that is built into our project, and it kind of messes things up when VS Code does its own thing. But you are going to want this to be checked on. It'll take care of all of the indentation for you. It'll take care of cleaning up punctuation and things like that within the code itself, not necessarily your text, but make sure you have format on save checked. So between that and turning on word wrap, you should be good to go. Lastly, if we go to code, preferences, color theme, I have a bunch that I've installed because I like to play around with different themes, but there are a number that come installed with VS Code, and you can just kind of pick one that is good for you. You don't necessarily have to go with the default theme. I find that personalizing your editor a little bit makes working just a little bit more enjoyable. Okay, so now we've got this open. We've set word wrap and we've set format on save, and I'm going to open up the File Explorer on the left-hand side by hitting Command B. Or if you are on a Windows computer, you can do Control B. So we don't have a folder open yet. So I'm going to click on Open Folder, and we don't really have anything. So I'm going to go into my documents, I'm going to click New Folder, and I'm going to call this Class Demo. You should call it whatever is appropriate for your website, and I'm going to pick that. Now I am inside my Class Demo folder, and from here I can create new files. So I'm going to create a new file, and I'm going to call this index.html. Now, the index.html file is the home page of your website. Anytime you go to like wellsfargoadvisors.com or netflix.com or something like that, the page that you land on is index.html. So think of this as your home page. So now that I have this page created, I'm going to do my keyboard shortcut. I'm going to type an exclamation point and hit Tab. And that kind of gives me the basic scaffolding of my website. So I'm going to change the title here. I'm going to say Matt James Media, but you should call it whatever you want. And then I'm going to come down between the body tags. I'm going to create a couple things. I'm going to say header. I'm going to say, and then inside that header, I'm going to give it a nav. Inside the nav, I'm going to give it an unordered list. So I'm just typing the tag names and hitting Tab. And then I'm going to give it a couple LIs with A tags inside of them. Now I'm going to copy these and create about 4 different links. And I'm going to give these links some names: about, gallery, contact, and then, I don't know, blog roll or something. Okay, so that's my nav in the header. I'm going to do a main, and in here I'm going to give this an H1 that just says this is the home page, and then a paragraph with some lorem placeholder text. Then I'm going to give it an aside. This is some extra stuff. And then a footer. Okay, great. So let's put a little copy in here. Okay, cool. So we'll save this. And now if I want to view this in the browser, I can come over to, I can open up my Finder. There we go. And what are we calling this? Class Demo. So I'll get into this folder. And then I'm going to open this up in Firefox. And then here's everything that I just put in there. So we've got the nav that I just added. The H1 says this is the home page, and then some lorem text. I'm not sure what's going on here, but I'll check that in a second. So let's go back to VS Code. Oh, there's some weird autocomplete going on. Okay, so we'll save fake websites and then leave that alone. So we'll save this. Now let's create our different pages. So I'm going to say copy it all, create a new file. I'll call this about.html. Paste that in there, and then I'm going to change a couple things so we know that this is a different page. I'll say this is the about page, and then we'll change the text on the aside. Copy all this, create a new file. We'll call this contact. Whoops. Gotta make sure you actually call it copy.html and not copy.jtml, which is not a thing. Okay, good. Paste that in there, change some things so we know that we're on a different page. And then we'll make one more page, so then we'll have a 4-page website. And this we'll call writing.html. Change a couple things here. Great. So now we have these 4 pages, and we can prove that by coming in here and changing the name of the file that we're looking at. There's the About page. Let's look at Contact. See the content changing. And then we'll look at Writing just to make sure that that's all good. And there we go. Great. So now how do we link to all of these different pages? Well, we're going to do that using these A tags. So I'm going to come back to the home page here. And actually what I'm going to do is I'm going to move this down. And we'll make this first link home page just for demonstration. So what we need to do is we need to take these A tags and we need to tell them which pages within our project they need to go to. And the way that we're going to do that is with the href attribute. So the href specifies where that link is supposed to go. And basically what you need to do is you need to point at each of these files within those A tags to get the linking to work. So here on index.html, for the link to the home page, I'm going to type period slash, and notice that a list of suggestions comes up for files that we could go to at the level that we're specifying with the period and the slash. So I'm going to select index.html, and that's going to be my href. So the period slash means look at the same level in the folder as this current file is in. I will show you shortly what you would do if you were in a folder that was if you were inside a folder that was at the same level as these files. But for now, just know all of these 4 files are at the same level. So to link to each of them, we're going to say period slash and then the name of the file. And VS Code is really helpful with giving you kind of path suggestions when you start typing the path into your href. So we'll say period slash, and this is the one that we want to go to the About page, period slash, Contact, period slash, Writing, and then we're good. So let's go ahead and copy this header with the nav, and we'll put this in all of the other pages. And now I'm in Contact, and in Writing. Okay, so now I have this navigation in every one of my pages. So I might change the title tag from here. So in the About page, I might do pipe about, just so you know you're on a different page when you're looking in the browser. Pipe Contact, pipe Writing. Okay, so let's go back to Firefox, and once you make those changes to the HTML, you have to reload the page. So we're going to reload to get those new HTML structures, and notice that the title tag has changed. I've got that pipe Writing now on the blog page. But more importantly, we have a functioning navigation in here. We can click Home, and now we're on the home page. We can click About, and we're on the About page. Click Contact on the Contact page, Blog, Writing page, and this is the same from every page within the site because we have set up a navigation that takes us back and forth to all of our different pages. So that's great. But now we need to style this. We need to put some CSS in here. So I'm going to create a new folder within my class demo project. I'm going to hover over and I'm going to click the new folder icon, and I'm going to call this CSS. And then I'm going to toggle that down and click New File while I have that highlighted. And I'm going to make a new file called style.css. And the first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to add the bit of CSS that I put in every single CSS file I ever write, which is HTML, body, margin 0, padding 0. That's going to take the margin and the padding away from the top level elements. I'm going to say image width 100%, height auto. That is going to make it so by default images will be the width of the container that they're in, and they will size their height proportionate to their content. That can be overridden on a case-by-case basis. It just is a good baseline for flexible images within containers. Then I'm going to use the star selector to select every element on the page. I'm going to say box sizing, border box. Great. So if we come back over to Firefox, we're going to see that really nothing has changed. It looks pretty much the same. But now I can start adding some CSS. Well, there's two things. First of all, the reason that nothing has changed is because we haven't linked the CSS to these HTML files yet. So I'm going to add some basic information around the heading. So I'm going to say H1, H2, H3, H4, all separated by commas. So I'm selecting all of these elements. I'm going to say margin top 0. Let's say font weight normal. And then on the body, I'm going to just kind of change the text color. So we'll say color 444 64A, and let's give the body a background of light gray. So okay, so now if we come back here and we refresh, we see still nothing has happened. So what we need to do is we need to wire up this HTML into each of our HTML pages so that the HTML pages are aware of the CSS that we're writing. So we'll start with index.html. We'll come up in the head, and above the title tag, I'm going to type link and hit tab. And that immediately is going to give me the appropriate reference that I need to link a style sheet. So autocomplete will give me the rel attribute equals style sheet. That tells the browser that this is the file that is responsible for styling the page. Look to this file to know how to look. And now in the href attribute, we need to give it a path to that file. So we are at the same level as our CSS folder. So we're going to say period slash. And now you can see the CSS folder comes up in these suggestions. And then autocomplete will tell us what files are in there that we have to choose from. So we'll say style.css, which is what that is. So we'll save that, and we'll refresh, and we'll go to the home page. And now you can see there's no margin or padding on the side. The text is right up against the edge. You see the text is a little bit lighter, and you can see that the heading is a normal font weight. But if we go to About, none of that's the case. Same with Contact, same with Blog. And the reason for that is that we have not wired up the CSS with those other pages. So let's do that. So I'm going to copy this line, and I'm going to go to my About page. I'm going to paste it in there. I'm going to go to Contact, paste it in there, and Writing, paste that in there. So now I'm going to refresh, now that I've changed all the HTML pages. And if I go to each of the pages, you can see that that CSS is applying. So that is the way that you can put together a multi-page site, multiple HTML files, and set up some CSS. So that's great. That's a great start, but maybe I want some images in here. So again, within my project, not in the CSS folder, within my project, I'm going to click New Folder. I'm going to call this Images. And then I need to add some images. So let's go back to the Finder and open up the Images folder, and I'll just drag this photo of my son in here, and we'll rename it. Evan Guitar. Okay, great. So I'm going to come back to my HTML here, and then in the About page, I'm going to put an image tag in the aside. So we'll say img, tab, and then it gives me the source attribute and the alt attribute. So now the source needs to point to that file, to that images file, that file in the images folder. So I'll say period slash, again, because I'm at the same level as that images folder when I'm in this HTML file. I'm going to pick the images folder. I'm going to pick that JPEG, and then I'm going to give this some alt text. So people with assistive technology will be well served. And then I'm going to come back to my page, refresh, go to the About page, and there we go. We've got that image. And notice that this image is the full width of the page. That is because in my CSS, I have selected all of the images and said width 100%, height auto. In this page, this is 100% of the page from edge to edge. If I were to change that, let's say I had a class on here. I could say class equals page dash main, and then in my CSS I would say dot page main width 95%, max width 960 pixels or whatever, margin 0 auto, save it, come back. And now you can see that that content is smaller and centered, but that image is still 100% width of that container. And maybe I don't want that. I think it's fine, but maybe I don't want that. I could give this image a class. I'll say class equals main dash image. Save it, and then in my CSS for this image, I'll select that class selector, and I'll say with 50% float left, and we'll come back here, and then there we go. Give it a little margin on the side. Oh, you got to spell margin right for that to work. There we go. So that's how you set up a multi-page website, link CSS to it, and insert images.